Relief efforts continue in Libya's northeast region, which is battered by Mediterranean storm Daniel, which dumped 8 months of rain. Devastated communities in its wake. 2 dams collapsed on September the 11th, hitting the eastern city of Derna the worst and wiping out a quarter of the area. Bridges were destroyed and food supplies disrupted as relief teams moved in to provide support after thousands died in the destruction. We're now joined by Suleman Dhanchora, who is with the Al-Imdaad Foundation. He is their projects coordinator, to update us on their work and how the region is responding. Good evening to you, Suleman, and welcome to the program. The humanitarian crisis is vast. Entire families have simply been wiped out. Share with our viewers what you and your team have been seeing, what you've been witnessing, and the stories you've heard.
A very good evening to you, Iman Bongiwe, and everyone back home, and thank you for having me this evening. Certainly, we've seen unprecedented rainfall, and as you rightfully mentioned, that storm Daniel has been carving its way. It's been through Turkey, Bulgaria, and various other countries, with the death toll there at 20. But this does not compare to the level of destruction and devastation that it has caused in Libya. And as you've rightly mentioned, 8 months worth of rain glutted the city of Derna in a period of 24 hours, subsequently causing 2 major dams to collapse, the second of which now referred to in the local language as Saddul Maut, the dam of death. And this created a wave, a tsunami-like torrent of water that swamped the city. The deluge uplifted entire homes and buildings. Many of these were deposited into the high seas. Absolute catastrophe on the ground. This is a disaster in every sense of the word. And to explain to you what we're seeing right now, families along the coastline waiting for the bodies of their loved ones to wash the coastline teeming. Just yesterday, my esteemed colleague Irfan Ahmed and I, in the city of Derna, one can certainly smell the death lingering in the air. Various different challenges will be faced now. Rescue workers have explained that they found remnants of motor vehicles that have washed along the shoreline as families, 5, 6, cramped into cars with a few prized possessions, tried to flee this torrent of water that came at them. Various different problems. 80% of Libya's water is sourced from underground, from boreholes, groundwater. Yes.
So what you've described is a really vivid picture of the destruction that's been wrought in the aftermath of this, of this destruction. How do you design then an operational response given the complexities that you've described of the terrain and exactly what's happened?
So Libya in itself is a very, very atypical situation. Although we don't normally comment on the political climate here, we know that there are 2 different parties, the Dubaiba-based government in the west and Haftar and his forces on the east, both of them competing for power and both of them considering the other to be illegitimate. So it is quite complex. But we've been fortunate that with coordination with different sectors, there is a temporary truce. Search and rescue operations have been hampered. It has been difficult for 3 different reasons. First and foremost, the presence of landmines, which were buried underground many, many years ago. The flood has caused these to be unearthed. Secondly, very, very murky water as a result of the deluge that's fed into the sea. And thirdly, corpses that are now buried about 25 to 30 meters beneath the sea level. Fortunately, though, in order to overcome these challenges, we see that now different organizations are working together. We've seen that specialized aquatic search and rescue personnel were unable to retrieve bodies. And we've seen, for example, the Emirates have dispatched submersible equipment with sonar capabilities to try and bring out bodies. There's also a shortage of humanitarian aid on the ground, and as a result of this, we managed to coordinate through the Jordanian armed forces and our office in Jordan humanitarian aid to be airlifted from Jordan to Benina Air Base, which will now be handed over to 50,000 people who are currently displaced.
So again, as you say, it seems like a lot of different organizations working together and a number of convergent needs. What, in your estimation, is amongst the most pressing of the needs that need to be responded to?
So in the words of Martin Griffith, the UN Secretary General, he mentioned that this is a catastrophe of climate and capacity. We need to try and assess how we can improve the capacity of the authorities to try and see now, at this point, to the needs of 50,000 people that are displaced. As we've mentioned, there is an imminent threat. There are still mud-encased bodies that are trapped underground and groundwater contamination. There have been cases of typhoid fever, hepatitis A, cholera, etc. So certainly a need to try and see to the needs of 50,000 people who are displaced. We know that the death toll now of those that are deceased or missing, who are also now presumed to have passed away, is 20,000. But we need to now focus on what it is that can be done for 50,000 people who are displaced and will be very much in need of fundamental humanitarian aid.
It's just astonishing. When you say those numbers, it's just astonishing. And some people were just simply washed away, and their bodies, one doesn't know if they will be recovered and be able to be buried even. You know, it's happening in a context, Suleman, claims over negligence. We've just heard that Libya's chief prosecutor has ordered the detention of some officials in relation to this. What are some of the conversations people are sharing with you as they try to come to terms with the tragedy?
So certainly there is much frustration on the ground. We've seen international media covering protests in the past as well. But the situation in Libya, as I mentioned, is very, very atypical. And it is a little bit difficult to apportion blame here. We know that the country is divided, as we discussed earlier, two parallel governments, both of them vying for power against each other, and both of them considering the other body to be illegitimate. Yes, there were concerns that the meteorological organizations had sounded the alarm 72 hours before the floods had occurred. And there are questions that are being asked that if these alarms had been sounded, why is it that institutions and civil services did not get the population mobilized, did not begin evacuation procedures? But this is all now the benefit of hindsight and retrospect. I think the more pressing issue for the people of Libya is to try and assist 50,000 displaced people who have absolutely nowhere to be. The city of Derna was a beautiful, affluent city, lined with palm trees and a young population. This flood has wiped out almost half of the city. So the most pressing thing at this moment in time, I think, would be to try and assess the needs of 50,000 people. We also have to bear in mind, many times, especially in disaster situations, we tend to overlook the psychological aspect of it, grieving the loss of loved ones, bodies of instances, and it's common in Libyan society that normally descendants and offspring would construct their homes directly above that of their parents. So in some cases, entire families, extended families, cousins, relatives have all been wiped out in a period of 20 minutes. So I think the most pressing concern now is to try and tend to the survivors of this catastrophic disaster.
The intergenerational loss is just staggering. Thank you very much for sharing with us the picture, the scale of the destruction and the loss of life and the aftermath of this tragedy that occurred earlier in September.